Good afternoon. It's Andy Hudson. This is the next episode of MIHOA, MIHOA Live, and really excited today to get started with a super special guest who's a good friend of hockey in St. Louis, also a good friend of Missouri Ice Hockey Officials Association. We've got Mike McKenna. Mike, are you there? Unmute it all. Here we go. There he is. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
What's going on? It's going great. I brought a special guest with me today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Hey, Doc, how are you?
Hi, Andy. We've got two generations of McKenna sitting here, not just myself, but also my dad, Terry.
That's all right. That's great. Special guest. I love it. I love it. Well, Doc, you're my dentist, so I want you to know that I did floss last night. So,
okay. There's plenty of people in hockey. It's funny though. They find out he's a dentist and they figure that he's got a pathway to doing everybody as soon as they lose a tooth. What
exactly.
people don't realize is that most of the people Dad plays with, they wear cages. Right.
Well, have I ever shown you this? I'm joking. Yeah.
Flipper in. I thought you were going to do the classic play where you're out at dinner with your friends and you take your flipper out and put it in somebody's drink. Never did.
No. That's a good one. I might need to try that. But well, anyway, thanks a lot for joining us today. This is great. As you may or may not know, I started this a couple weeks ago when this whole COVID-19 thing went on, and I had Joe Sullivan. I think you probably know Sully.
Very well. Yeah. Sully and his dad, great people. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And Dan Sullivan was one of the first people that I met when I moved to St. Louis through hockey. So it was great. And then his son Joe has done quite well. And then we had Jamie Koharski on, who we talked with Jamie a little bit about you guys. And then his dad, Don, said to tell you hello. So hello.
Great stories with Don. I mean, not just refereeing, from him coaching our Pee Wee team. And then years later, him end up refereeing my first win and shutout in the NHL when I was with Tampa Bay. Don worked that game. And thankfully, Don called a couple of, I guess we could call them marginal at best penalties on the Islanders in the last 5 minutes. Never discussed this with him. Don't know if there was an attempt to preserve a shutout that was happening, but nonetheless, one of the Islanders players got out of the box with about 10 seconds left and got a breakaway right on it and got Poso out of the box. And it almost foiled all the plans, but yeah, that was pretty cool. Imagine coming full circle like that, like how many years later do you think that was from
him coaching?
Yeah. It's Pee Wees, so we're like 12.
Yeah. 10, a little bit more than 10 years.
Yeah, easily a decade later. Yeah.
And did you and Jamie play together?
Yeah, he's my defenseman.
Oh, okay. Good.
Stay at home, steady, heavy on the lumber. Yeah. Jamie and I actually, it's funny, we talk about it in the podcast we did together on mine, 6 Degrees with Mike McKenna. Shameless plug, I know, but
that's okay.
Jamie and I talked about it where we were playing a tournament in Houston of all places, and he was given a 10-minute misconduct, and whoever was officiating made him serve it in the box while the Zamboni was still going around afterwards. And we get to the locker room, we go, "Where's Coho?" And we look out there and he's still sitting in the box with the officials berating him, and he's still stuck in there.
I love it. When we were talking to talk about 10-minute misconduct, we were talking to Sully, because in college hockey, goalies actually serve 10-minute misconducts. Were you aware of that? Have you ever gotten a 10-minute misconduct in college? Or
well, thankfully, no, I didn't face that. I mean, I consider myself pretty up on the rule book. I was one of the few people that actually ever read it. But the college rule book's one I didn't know that. I was unaware. I mean, no, I've never seen it before.
Yeah, that's crazy. I've always thought that maybe it'd be good if coaches got on sportsmanlike conduct, that the coach would have to sit in the box.
Yeah, and feel shame, just so and then they'd get free.
Yeah. Exactly, and sit down. So I started refereeing basketball a few years ago. I don't know if you knew that. And it's just like CYC youth basketball. One of the rules they have in youth basketball is if a coach gets a technical foul, he has to sit the entire game on the bench. He can't, if his butt gets off that seat, bang, you bang him again and he's gone. So it's the seatbelt rule.
That's great. That should be like a designated area to get it sponsored. Like, if it was racing, it'd be Simpson Safety Equipment.
Uh-oh. It looks like Mike and Terry froze up a little bit on us here, folks. Well, we're going to let them hopefully get that worked out here. But we're really happy to have Mike and Terry here with us. This is Andy Hudson. Hopefully he'll be logging back in. We're going to talk to Mike and Terry about their grandpa, Bill McKenna, who's one of the founding fathers of youth hockey. There they are. Okay. Hey, the COVID-19 gotcha. I'm just kidding. I hope it didn't.
I don't know what's going on with it. I think we've had internet issues today, ironically enough. So I took the phone off of the internet. Now we're on data, but
okay.
It's because the world's just eating up all the internet right now, all the bandwidth.
I think it is. How are you handling all of this, by the way, Mike?
For myself, it's okay. I mean, I think it's all right for people to discuss and admit that they're struggling at times with this, though, too. I mean, our oldest daughter's first grade. She's doing e-learning. Never had a desire to be a teacher myself whatsoever. My wife's done a really nice job with it, but it's really hard to motivate children at home. They don't feel like they're at school. They're not in their natural setting. They're not around their friends. And that's been a battle. It hasn't been particularly easy. It's not like summer break. So we've gotten better at it. That part's been a challenge for myself, being a TV analyst now for the Golden Knights. It's really weird. It just overnight we're not calling games and talking about hockey any longer. So, as a team with the Golden Knights, we're doing our best to create content, stay engaged, but it's just not the same. I'd be lying to you if I said otherwise. We're trying our best to make sure we're doing fun, entertaining stuff. But what's most fun and entertaining is talking about hockey.
Yeah, for sure. So I sent you a few questions just as samples. We don't have to talk about all of them, but so how did you get started with hockey? I mean, I know your dad played and your grandpa played, but when did you know that you were going to be a hockey player?
Well, I as a profession, probably the first day I played pro. I never considered that really possible, but it was a foregone conclusion, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was no choice.
I mean, you could almost tell it better than I could, really. I mean, before I could really even think about playing the game, where did you see it in me that I really wanted to do that?
Well, it starts in the basement, like so many people, and you mess around there. Some kids just stand there and shoot, and other kids shoot for a while, and then they go, "Oh, shoot at me." And so the tennis balls came out, and that's where it starts, and just went on from there.
Yeah.
And tried to keep him from playing goal as a little bitty guy. And it's very good at standing in front of the net and just hammering the thing in. And but the next year the coach decided he could be a goalkeeper. So yeah,
it just, I think a lot of it though really is because of dad, because of grandpa being off ice officials with the NHL here in St. Louis. That's really what did it. Being able to go to every home game and show up and be fascinated by the goaltenders of every team that was in the building. The guy with all the equipment on and the cool mask, that was the coolest guy in the building. That's who I wanted to be. So the equipment drew me in. And thankfully, yeah, dad and grandpa had the presence of mind that I needed to at least be able to skate before I could ever turn goaltending full time. So that was a couple of years. And it's funny now because I look back thinking I had to wait to be a goalie until I was 7 or 8. And my daughter now is doing learn to play, or will be when everything hopefully gets back to normal. And she's 7 years old, So that was kind of my genesis of it for sure. It was just even being able to go to all those games down at the old arena in St. Louis.
And who was the goalie that you most admired?
Greg Millen was the first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was my formative years. I'm 3 or 4 years old in the mid '80s, and it progressed. It went from Millen to Joseph, Jablonski, Fuhrer. Everybody who put that jersey on. I know Jablonski stood out in my mind because he was like a second incarnation of Millen because he called with his right hand, which I did too, which is rare. And so that's a reason why I followed him, even to Tampa Bay afterwards is kind of a favorite guy too. But yeah, Curtis Joseph and Millen and Fuhrer and them, huge influences on myself.
Awesome. And this question is for both of you, but tell us a little bit about Grandpa Bill. Tell us about your kind of favorite memories of Bill and maybe how he helped you get started in hockey.
Why don't you take this here? I mean, really, how did he get the hockey bug is really the best question, because he was at the forefront of hockey in St. Louis.
Yeah. I don't know the real origin with him other than being a South St. Louis guy and Carondelet Park being nearby. And the winters were much colder, and they played a fair amount on natural ice in Carondelet Park. They also played on old-time metal roller skates in the streets of South St. Louis. And the Flyers were the American League team here in town, and they went to the games at the arena that the Flyers played. And so that introduced him to a bunch of those South St. Louis guys who were interested. And he was a minor league baseball player, and somewhere there's some connection between somebody, and I'm not sure who that is. One of the main people around town was Ed Olson, and Ed Olson was the first American to lead the American Hockey League in scoring way back when, in the 40s or early 50s. But Olson worked at the brewery, and he was a good baseball player, and then he ended up pitching batting practice for the Cardinals. And so somehow my dad met Olson through a trainer or something, and so he got to know Ed. And there was a little bit of a group of people in St. Louis who are Eastern prep school players who came here to work for the shoe industry or whatever it might be. And that team traveled to Memphis and Cincinnati and played a little bit. Somehow my dad ended up playing with them. It wasn't anything significant pro-wise or anything, but it was just guys who had played in college, and they picked up some other local, enthusiasts or athletes. And that's really my first memory of up close and personal to hockey, was going to one of their practices, which took place at a place called the Winter Garden, which was on Bolivar, rather squarish piece of ice with no boards, really for figure skating. And being around those guys there, and there weren't any nets at the rink. We carried in 2x4 nets that had tennis nets strung onto them that we did at our house, and then put them in the station wagon and took them down there. So anyhow, that's how far back he goes. This is mid-50s. And so anyway, we just around Olson and everything. And when the Flyers left, and there wasn't hockey here for a long time. And in '62, the Blackhawks sent a farm team here. And at that time, the linesmen were local folks, and the referee was a trainee from the NHL. And so Olson asked my father to be one of the linesmen, and that got us close again, to another level of the game. And it just went from there when then the Blues came and youth hockey took off.
Yeah.
And he really, from doing those lines in the old Central League to doing youth games, and Bruce Hood was a big influence on him, right? He'd talk about him quite a bit.
Right.
To doing high school games. And the fun thing about Grandpa Bill, though, is that we still hear these stories all the time from people that he was on the ice with, and he didn't just referee or officiate them. He'd teach them as the game went along. And he'd give frivolous penalties, and he just made the game a lot of fun. And kind of that segue between baseball and hockey was, I remember I played one game and played really, really well. And this is close to his passing. So I was probably, 12 something years old at this time, 11, 12. And I remember coming up to the car afterwards and going, Michael, if I had ever known hockey could have been this fun, I'd have never chased that little white ball around. Right. And it just really stuck with me. And, again, these stories, there's a guy named Wolfie who works at the rink at Kirkwood. And Wolfie will tell you the story about, the one time he knocked a player down at Kirkwood when it was outdoors, no roof. water everywhere all over the ice because it was October or something.
Right.
And Wolfie was upset at this kid, and he took a stick and he kind of sprayed water all over him. And Grandpa took him and he goes, "Wolfie, you're going to the box." "What do you mean, man?" He goes, "Number whatever, 2 minutes for splashing."
Splashing.
He didn't call it sportsmanlike anything. He just 2 minutes for splashing, and that's a lot of what we got with Grandpa. Was the rule book was kind of flexible, but that's what made so much fun with them too.
Yeah. There's I think officials now would get in trouble for that kind of thing, but there is something good about that rapport that you build with the hockey world.
Yeah.
So I had put a picture up of the three of you. I don't know if you saw that I had shared.
Yeah,
that picture.
3 generations from Kirkwood when it was still outdoors. That's cherished. Yeah.
That's great. So when Bill passed away, and was it 97?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was the impetus for starting the foundation that now carries his name? Terry, do you remember that? Or like, how did that whole thing start?
Yeah, that started before he died.
Oh,
And
okay.
I don't know, he wasn't a big golfer, and we weren't around country clubs or anything, but somehow he heard about Evans scholarships for kids that caddy and then go on to college. And for whatever reason, he thought that would be a good idea and a way to get youth people started as referees. And that was the beginning of it. There was a couple of fellas, I think the guy's name was Bob Rosenthal, and boy, the other man I can't remember, but one of them was involved with fundraising and just appropriate stuff to starting some sort of a scholarship fund or some charitable foundation. And that's how it began. And it went, pretty well for a while. And he was real happy how much money they were able to give away in those early years, the mid 90s or whatever. And then it kind of languished for a while until Andy Hudson and a couple of other guys.
I think we know that guy.
Took over, and it really, really bumped the thing into a different level.
Yeah. Well, I've just loved being a part of it, I have to admit. And the Tim Peel camp, I got the banner behind me here, is something that's been fantastic, and we really hope it goes off this year. We had to push it back, as you probably know, to later in July, but it's been just great seeing the young people that have been impacted by hockey and officiating and how great it is. And a lot of people don't know this, and maybe Bill said this at one time, is how tight knit the officiating community is in hockey. And a lot of players and coaches don't realize that, because they're tight knit with their teammates and all, but they don't think about the refs. But it really is a fraternity,
I would notice that every time Grandpa would bring me along when he'd be officiating a game. Like a great instance would be high school games, and even just the two-man crew would be in the room having a great time, and then the next two-man crew comes in the referee's room, and they just would sit and hang out for a while. And then the more I got to know really the Koharski family, that was kind of my introduction to really how tight that group is, especially at the professional level, college. When you start getting into working games that are really high stakes, and they all talk about it too. It was their way to stay in the room, right? For players, it's the same. But I remember this year we had the Fortress Invitational out in Vegas, and I was working the tournament as a color guy. And I just went downstairs to say hi to a couple of the officials because they'd worked my American League games previously. And I was just so happy to see some of these guys. And I think, I'm trying to think of who was in that crew. I feel like Gino Bindo was, and maybe some others, but, they were names people would recognize in the officiating community. And the guys are just so happy to see one another. And for me, it was cool because I think I always had a different relationship with them because of the way Grandpa was so involved, that, they were happy to see me. And they're usually not happy to see players. Unless it's like it's St. John's at 11 o'clock and somebody will buy them a couple of rounds, because, that's
right.
when it, like settle down a little bit.
Exactly. So like, what was when you were on the ice in the American League or the East Coast League or whatever, what was your relationship like with the officials? Did you have a good rapport?
Yeah, for sure. And there were always times where you get upset with people, for sure. That's normal. But for the most part, I tried my best to keep things really loose and just enjoy the game with them, because the people that are actually on the ice in the thick of the things that are completely impartial are the people wearing the stripes. Now, the fans don't believe that. The officials are out to get everybody's home team. Isn't it funny how the home team is just always getting screwed by the officials? But in any case, when I wanted to have a laugh, when I wanted to be able to let off a little steam, I'd talk to the linesman when he come by and pick up the puck, out of my glove, or just say hi to them as they went by. And it was fun because sometimes we'd talk about where they worked the game previously, or if they saw somebody else on the ice that I knew or was friends with. And it's cool. Like goalies especially, and captains really have that kind of special relationship with officials.
Yeah. And there's a lot of goalkeepers in MIHOA that were goalkeepers that have become really good officials. And I think it's because you're on the ice the entire game and you have that wide view, from the back, and you can see plays developing and all of that. It gives the officials that are goalkeepers themselves, it really gives them that tool already in their toolbox.
Yeah, it's probably similar to why we all end up being broadcasters. Because you're right, though, we do. Yeah. We see everything in front of us. So, and always being on the ice, you really don't miss anything because you can't. The puck can come your direction at any time, and it does. It kind of goes hand in hand like that. We're not the fleetest of foot usually, but that's changing. Goalies are becoming pretty good athletes now, and just like officials, like I look at some of these guys that started officiating, they can fly now, and that's no joke. There's a reason for that. You got to keep up with the game. You got to be in position, and it's always cool. You probably see it as an off-ice official, right? When you go downstairs, right. What are the referees doing?
Riding the bike, doing something. Yeah,
right.
And yeah,
they're warming up just like us. It's like Peelsy breaks his ankle and he's ready like 4 weeks later. Wow, what a credit to him and his rehab, and Jeff Lavecchio, whose dad was an official.
The King. He was called the King.
And my favorite, Mr. Lavecchio, and this was legendary for him. I don't know how many people picked up on it, but he'd call a penalty, and he had the flip with the finger. Remember?
Yeah.
You. And that was it. Yeah. And that was just a little turn.
Point to the box.
Yep.
Yeah. He was always one of my favorite to work with, the King, because you knew you were gonna have a good time out there. He never wore elbow pads as a referee, which I thought was crazy, because if you catch an edge, you just break that elbow.
Yeah.
And people give me grief now because I wear I wear a padded shirt, and I'm like, I'm going to put as much as I can on now. What the heck?
Right.
So
I tell you what, honey, I play pickup hockey with Dad in the mornings when I can, Friday mornings in St. Louis when I'm here, and I started playing in Vegas with our group out there. And I wore a half shield for a lot of years, and I'm a pro hockey player. And then I got on TV, and I went, I can't do this any longer. So, I'm wearing it now. It doesn't make any difference. Like, why bother? Wear all the protective gear you can.
Yeah.
I don't understand bravado.
So did you ever think about refereeing, either of you?
Did you?
I really didn't. And it's an easy out, but I really didn't have time, in the sense that, first of all, in high school, there was very limited hockey in St. Louis. There was really no real need for many referees. And then when I started college, that time was just way too busy. And then I left for 4 years to go to school after that. And so those 8 years, I came back to find, I knew what was going on in the meantime, but things had changed just completely. And the whole hockey scene had just grown so much. Number of rinks had grown to such a degree. And, Dad had that that part of the thing covered. I think that was his niche, and I didn't really find a desire to impose on that or be in the way of that at all. And it was, I would be working in my garage on weekends all the time. And
that's race cars. Dad used to race. So yeah, you had other things going. Yeah.
And okay, well, I'll see you in the morning on Saturday. I got 2 at Queenie first thing, and then I'll be over to the house. So he'd show up at the house and, still with shin guards and knee pads and, baggy pants on. And he'd change at the house there and come out in the garage and we'd work on stuff. And, so that was kind of our routine, and refereeing was just his thing. And I didn't really ever have any desire to get involved in something that was so important to him.
I came really close, early teenage years.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I went to the referees camp and everything, and I think the only reason was just trying to find time. Similar. I was at that stage where I was starting to play a lot of hockey, and finding even more time for hockey just never aligned. But man, I'm telling you, Huddy, there's that desire deep down in me that at some point, if all this stuff goes away and if I just end up being a regular Joe, it'd be a lot of fun to do.
You should do it.
There's part of me, I'm not kidding, that I think I might even get more out of refereeing than I would coaching. Because, refereeing, you don't have to be invested in anything. You can go out and still influence the kids in the right way. And one of the things that drives me crazy is how they don't give officials respect just because they didn't play at a high level or something. Well, you've earned your own respect on the ice through officiating. You've learned your own craft, Even myself playing in the NHL, if I go to be an official, I'm not going to be any good right out of the box. I've got to learn how to do that. But it would help, I think, down the long run, though, at least, what do you want to say to me? That's okay. I played a little bit,
Well, and there have been a lot of officials recently, and there's a guy named Dave Hill who grew up in St. Louis and played a lot of hockey. He's in his 50s, and he went to CBC, and he just started reffing when he's like 51 years old. He's a great hockey player, a great skater, and he is just he's just really gotten into it and started to enjoy it. So anyway, you have a lifelong invite to come back, or to come to officiating.
If nothing else, we're always going to be involved some way. That.
I'll sign the permission slip and give it to your wife. How's that sound?
Good.
Okay.
Good.
So
first and foremost.
Exactly. And speaking of your family, I want to put a picture up here, if I can, of this is a great photo here of you holding your daughter.
Yeah. That's Kenlyn. So the
this
one
is
I'm
your
holding
family.
right there, that's Kenlyn, and she actually turns 7 today. So
I was gonna ask, happy birthday to Kenlyn.
Yeah, so that's a great picture. That actually was from when I was playing in Portland, Maine, and it would have been 2016, I believe. So it was the last year the team was there before it was sold and unceremoniously moved to Springfield, Massachusetts. But yeah, that night I set the all-time wins record for the Portland Pirates. And there's Rachel with Adeline, who's now 4 years old and an absolute weapon. And Kenlyn wants to be a goalie as well. So we got our hands full.
Geez, that's crazy. Wow. I'm sure she maybe with the growth of women's hockey and girls hockey, man, she's got lots of opportunities. I think that's fantastic.
We're really excited about that there's no limit to it anymore. There's no glass ceiling. I mean, in St. Louis, it used to be that if girls wanted to play, they were playing with the boys no matter what. And it really seemed by teenage years, it was only goalies, a lot of it. Right. It would siphon off a decent amount. And now the explosion of girls hockey is great, and women officials as well. So there's avenues they can pursue.
We need more female officials, I will tell you, to keep up with the growth of girls hockey. But I will tell, I'm fortunate to line for the Lindenwood women's game occasionally, and then doing some youth girls games, and they're always like the most enjoyable games because for the most part they're just more friendly. No testosterone, and But I mean, boys hockey is great too, but there's something about girls hockey that especially when it's really good girls hockey, like the 19U AAA girls team is just fantastic. It's just a really good brand of hockey to watch, and to officiate for sure. So.
Well, our 4-year-old Adeline's going to shatter that. She's dangerous.
We'll be watching. So we try to keep these things about 30 minutes, and we're at 30 minutes now, but I want to wrap up with one question. So what does the Bill McKenna Memorial Scholarship Foundation mean to your family? And what do you have to say about the foundation?
I guess the best thing about it is that it keeps somebody's name who was significant to the game here in town, keeps that name in front of people. It reminds people that there's a history here
that's bigger than Grandpa.
Yeah,
because
right.
he was tied to so many people.
Yeah, and it's to hear it for us, for me personally, it provides more times for that 50-year-old to come up and tell me a story, just like Mike said about the guy for splashing, about some morning that he got put off for whatever. And so it gives me more opportunities to hear those stories, which, without something to remind everybody, those kind of go away. So it's really good that way, but the historic value is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. Well, and with Grandpa's name associated with it, sure, from our perspective with the family name, it's really cool. It's really important. My daughters love seeing his picture when we go to Kirkwood. They always say hi to great Grandpa Bill, even though they never met him. He's still very important to them. But what Dad said about the history aspect is really important, because when you hear his name and then you learn other things about Amateur Hockey Hall of Fame in town and how that ties in, and then you start to dig back in the archives of who's also in that kind of ties the whole city together with it, because there is a lot of lineage here that goes back to the 50s and beyond, but it isn't until just recently that we've really picked that steam up and taken the next step into producing NHL hockey players and Stanley Cup winners and hopefully officials. It's just really cool. I mean, it is amazing when somebody comes up to you and says, "Man, I used to love when that old white-haired guy would do our games." That's really the best, isn't it? Right. Because there's always a story.
I wish I could be that white-haired guy someday, but I'm afraid I won't. But
you can always call you.
Exactly. Well, guys, this has been great. 30 minutes. The time flies in 30 minutes.
It always does.
Really appreciate you bringing your dad on, Mike and Terry. Great to see you as always.
Really appreciate it. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, you bet. And for those of you that are watching, we're going to keep doing this every week. And we were talking about women's hockey. So next week is Shauki Brown, who was like she was the first female to work junior hockey. She worked in the USHL back in the 80s.
Yeah, that's cool.
And she's now the Central District Referee in Chief from up in Chicago. I'm sure she's a Blackhawks fan, but we won't hold that against her. But
I'm ambivalent. I mean, we're Golden Knights for me.
There you go. Right.
Whatever they won, but yeah, that's great.
So we're going to have her on, and we're going to talk to her about her story and all that. So hopefully you guys can watch that too. But it's been great. It feels like I'm just talking to two old friends. So thank you very much. And
well, you are.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, one old friend and one not so old friend.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, thanks a whole bunch. Happy birthday to your daughter, and thanks to your wife for letting you spend some time with me. And say hi to Bev also.
Anytime. All right. Yeah.
All right, guys.
Sure. Thanks
a lot.
Thanks
all right. Take care. See ya.
Jim Field Camp. See you soon.
That's right. All right. Bye-bye.